Bump, ba bump, bump. We are live recording. We've got an amazing, awesome, exciting podcast here today. Tiasha and myself, Matt, here at TeraGanix. We're joined with the phenomenal Matt Powers, who's just been an amazing advocate and building a strong alliance with us at TeraGanix over the last year or two. It's been just an honor to get to know you, and today we're excited to learn a little bit more about your journey, your personal journey into permaculture, and geek out a little bit on soil health, talk a little bit about EM1. But for those who don't know you, I pulled this because I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so many qualifiers that we can give you. But we've got Matt Powers, best-selling author, amazing educator with the permaculture student, entrepreneur running events with Our Future, Our Soil, an amazing regenerative soil expert. Excited to talk about some of the soil biology and kind of get into the nitty-gritty with you. And yeah, just an overall permaculture enthusiast and ultimate family man. So yeah, share a lot of the same values as us on the TeraGanix team. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you here.
I really appreciate it. It is a pleasure to be here. You guys have been carrying the torch for, EMRO here in America for so long, and most folks have no idea the work that you guys have been doing and that you can continue to do. And so it's just an honor to be here. I love the simplicity of EM1. I love how much you guys give online. You guys are educators, not just providers of solutions. Your website's great. There's great recipes. You scale up to size for ag. And the solution you provide is ultimately it makes the most sense when people really understand it. And I think, if they came to it the way I did, they've been on a journey to figure out what it really is. And then when you figure out what it really is, it's like, oh, let's go. These are selected endophytes, right? So it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're just trying to continue to steward the best that we can and keep on the right direction. I think we're definitely seeing some tailwind here over the last 6 to 8 months, and I'd say a big reason for that, along with just kind of everything that we've been sowing into. Let's get a little bit into your journey and background, just as call it a permaculturist. What led you down that pathway and really doing what you've been doing the last decade?
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story. I think John Kemp summed it up from an interesting angle recently. He said, so many of us are here because of health crises. Almost every single person in this space of regenerative ag, of permaculture, of nutrient-dense food, even biodynamic, a lot of those people, and even a lot of the early adopters of organic, we're all we have a story, and we're having to deal with a huge part of our lives that we often don't showcase to the public. But it's health. It's almost always health. And so for us, I was a professional musician. I played bass, and I just had fun. I partied a lot, and we just toured, and I just had a very simple, straightforward life. And then I met my wife, and I just knew she was my wife 3 days into knowing her. And 3 weeks in, I accidentally blurted that I loved her. When you're 23 in New York City, you don't do that, but I did. And then 3 months later, I woke up and just turned to her and said, will you marry me? And I just blurted it out again. And 3 months later, we were married. And so I knew she was my wife. All these things just happened. It just was unbelievable. And then a year later, she got pregnant. And then a year after that, we had our first son. And when our first son was about 1 year old, we were doing all this stuff to try to figure out why she was so tired, always sick all the time. And they did a biopsy on her thyroid, and then they, in the middle of it, took her whole thyroid. And they didn't ask her permission. They told me what they were going to do, and then they did it. And I wasn't given an option. It wasn't, um, it was, it was awful. And so I became like immediately like much more stressed as a person in general. And I went through this time period of frustration, anger, and bitterness. When I asked when it would be safe for the baby to be around her after the radiation, I got 3 different answers. Like one's like 2 months, one's 6 months. It's like, I'm going to like rip apart this office now. You know what I mean? Like I was angry. And a lot of people were like, you're angry. That'd be weird to see, you know? I was a young dad. You know what I mean? I had a 1 year, like, this is a normal reaction for a new father, young father. And so I got super upset. And they couldn't give me solid answers, because what happened was 3 months after the radiation, after she had surgery from the first cancer, they gave her radioactive iodine, like 130 or 121 or 132, I can't remember. And she got cancer again, and it almost reached her lymph nodes. And then a month later, she got it again, and they had to do surgeries repeatedly. So she had 3 surgeries in the span of 6 months, maybe no, 4 months. And it fundamentally like changed everything for me. You know, life was not like a trivial, fun, partying thing. I had also, you know, become, better at music, and was training and trying to get higher up in that world. And she asked me to quit the music industry. And so I did, because we prayed about it. She prayed about it first, and I was like, ugh. And then I prayed about it, and I got the same answer. I was upset at the time, but it was the most important thing, actually, because then we went and lived with her folks, and then I tried to keep it going, and I worked in LA for a little while with Dave Jordan and Brian Karlstrom. Both, Dave recently passed. Brian passed away a few years after I was working with him. They're the genius duo that, did Alice in Chains' Dirt, the Offspring's albums, Social Distortion, like all these different bands. Like Dave Jordan was Brian Eno's protege. He worked on, Once in a Life, by, was it Once in a Lifetime? The Talking Head song, he mixed it in an hour and a half. So I got to work with him. That was like a amazing lifelong dream. He's the guy who produced Jane's Addiction's 80s albums. And so I was like, that was like a lifelong dream. But I had to like fully end that like within a year. So I was convinced I could figure it out. And I was commuting 4 hours, like to drive down to LA and back to the Fresno area. No, it wasn't 4 hours. It was like 8. I haven't thought about that in a while.
It's a long ways.
It is a long ways. I would drive down there and stay at my friend's house, Peter Simon, who's now the producer and co-writer for the Otis Kane records that are popular now. And our drummer is actually the drummer for Dave Matthews Band now. So I was like in this thing. I had good friends down there. I drove down there and stay like the first few days of the week and then drive back. Doesn't really help my wife very much. And so I quit that fully, finally, and I became a school teacher, and I hated it. I didn't want to be a school teacher. I didn't like school. School was like torture. The only time I liked school was when I was taught one-on-one at this like special sports boarding school. So I was like a ski racer, but I wasn't good like my brothers were. I get to go to all these programs because they hope that maybe something will happen. Nothing ever happened.
What you did as a school teacher, was that just, hey, I might like it and now I don't, or
No, what happened was someone at church who would later on become the superintendent for my district. He and my wife were working on me every Sunday, and they were trying to convince me to become a teacher because I had more education than like all the other teachers in the area. I was English major with Irish lit minor from NYU that started writing. I started trying to write books, ninth grade. And so like I had a lot of experience. My education was like higher than most of the people teaching, at public school in those areas, those rural areas. And so they like really wanted me to like just get in there. I got in there, and it slowly dawned on me because at first when you teach, you're just self-conscious. The kids will call. I weighed 40 pounds less, and I'm 6'2". I'm pretty skinny. People, I'm not like big, but I weighed 40 pounds less then, and they called me Skeletor and like all these terrible things. Life lessons learned, right? And so I really kind of grew up and matured and got over myself as I began to realize these kids are not being educated at all. And I got mad again. And I was like, these kids are being cheated of an actual education. And I was really lucky. My brothers were junior Olympians, Division I athletes. My brother got offered a full ride scholarship to Harvard if he would just ski for them, right? So like they were really good. And I just got to go along. And so I learned like high performance habits because that's the only reason I was able to keep up. So, right, because I wasn't a natural talent, but I did get like this great education on like work ethic, self-discipline, high performance habits, pairing with like small classroom. This is why I did homeschooling later on. Small classroom education with teachers one-on-one that were getting me through the curriculum quickly, but they're also teaching me to learn. And so I had a great education and I didn't realize it. I went to 3 different high schools and they're 3 different sizes. One was a sports boarding school with 45 kids. One was a public school with 3,000. And then one was a boarding school that focused on sports that wanted me for their ski program that I got in. And I was stuck for most of the year in the study hall with all the little kids. And I'm like the one sophomore in there. Yeah, anyway, so I've always had to work really hard to get anywhere in my life. My brothers always were, the older brothers, they were always so talented, and I never was. I really never was. I mean, you go talk to my teachers, they were like, he's a kind of a quirky one, and I was like, they're trying to be polite, it's a polite insult. And so I became a teacher because I saw these kids were being cheated. I realized that I had the ability to teach them things and keep their interest. And so I would teach and everyone would listen. And I would be like, wow, this is kind of crazy, man. Like you have an opportunity to like actually go. And then I started like preparing to sub and I would like show up and like teach the kids. And then I started getting banned from schools. And so some schools were like, felt threatened because the teacher's like, this person is obviously more talented than me. Ban them from the school. And so it's my education level. You know what I mean? At Bullard High School, yeah, there's a reason they banned me. So at Fresno High, yeah, I figured out what they were doing with their juniors and seniors in the remedial reading like level. This is like one of the things I talk about. They were teaching Hop on Pop to 11th and 12th graders, and the kids weren't reading it. They were going like this and just talking quietly as they pretended and mimed to read. Made me so angry that they would treat these kids like that. It's like you're demeaning them and then you're forcing them to go through the motions. It's like so evil. So I just was like, I'm a student advocate. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to help kids. And so some schools love that. I got picked up by a charter school and I was their full-time sub. And then because I could teach math. You know what I mean? Like I could go in there and I could teach algebra. And so I became the sub for this charter school that had just MacBooks. So the reason I'm good at presenting is I taught presenting using MacBooks because we didn't have books. We instead taught video, like we did essays so that we could turn the essays into video presentations that we'd stand and deliver or make a montage and do voiceover. And so the kids were all trained in multimedia. And then there was this huge like rock element. So like Minarets rock like staying. There was like all this stuff they would do. So I became the local English teacher. I became the head of the English department, and I got so into it that I got my master's degree, and I started teaching teachers, and I started teaching teachers how to get rid of homework so that they could authentically teach their kids without teaching to the test and the mind-numbing idiocy of the test, and so that when they show up, they understand things in a relational way that's fundamental and authentic, so that they actually could perform at those levels. And so I had a permaculture garden at the school eventually. I got into all of this so that I could initially, get health care, but I fell in love with teaching. And in the background, at home, I was putting in permaculture gardens because the soils in 112-degree ambient compound to 140 degrees. So I'm like figuring out all this high level stuff on educational and developmental psychology as I'm reading in tandem, like everything ever written on permaculture and organic and biodynamic and the history and, everything, ethnobotany, like indigenous, like the histories, everything I could to really digest and understand those universal principles of nature that we were interacting with. And so that's what allowed me to start growing food that everyone thought was impossible. I didn't have deer fences. There are deer everywhere. We lost, 40 chickens to a bobcat one night. Like it's it's wild. It's right outside Yosemite in the National Forest area. And so we I had to figure it out because I was doing the Gerson therapy for my wife during this time when I was a young teacher. And so that's juicing. So for almost 2 years, I did the juicing, the removing the plant fibers, the special diet, the coffee enemas with the correct coffee. We couldn't afford all of the supplements, but we did the best we could. And after 2 years, I was losing my mind, and because all the just the things, and I was working. And so my wife was like, "Please just stop. Your stress levels are not making it so I don't think any of this is benefiting me." And so but in attempting to do that, I was trying to grow all the juicing material. So all the carrots. I mean, if you know how it's 8 juices a day minimum. So
So
many
you were
carrots.
trying to grow it yourself.
I was trying to grow it myself,
Yeah.
and then I was,
What's the main reason you were trying to grow it yourself?
well, because we didn't have enough money. So we're living in a garage, still rent free. I'm working at a local high school on the head English department. I have a master's degree, and I'm making less and less every year.
Mhm.
My master's teacher told me that when I initially started as a student teacher, they told me that you will make less and less every year. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, I can see that I make more every year on paper. They're like, it doesn't matter. You'll see. And I was like, you're just jaded. This is Dave. I was like, Dave, you're just dated. And lo and behold, my healthcare went from free to $700 a month. And it's like they figured it out. And meanwhile, the head of the teachers union becomes the principal. And it's like, huh, you know? And so there was just like a lot of corruption. There was a lot of like they were squeezing teachers so that they would squeeze out the good teachers. People who could make money elsewhere would. And everyone else was getting their admin so they could switch to admin, and then just they wouldn't have the same pressures on them. So I was in a slowly closing trap. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to afford to get out of it as a teacher. And so it was a hard realization to have, but I realized I needed to figure out, and the plight I was in was the same plight as my students. So I realized I had to model the way out for them. And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to do Kickstarters, and we're going to do, practice making business plans and pitches and crowdfunders. And so we started writing them, and I created one eventually as a model, and then I launched it, and then it made $26,000 in a month. This is my first book. Yeah. And so I was I was trying to buy the best food, the best medicine, the best treatments for my wife, And the healthcare systems is such that if you are paying a certain amount, or if certain things happen, they can deny it. So even though they agreed to that, they can go back on their word. They can literally say you're approved, and then the day of the surgery, and then you have to pay in cash. So I've had to take like these money baths many times, and so we've gotten into debt, in and out of debt, over and over and over again, to deal with these sort of things. But my wife's still here, and she's faced cancer over 7 times. And a huge part of it is the fact that we just kind of did everything. We did all the alternative methods. We tried everything, and we really relied upon doing like things aggressively. And so things are still going on. There's not like an end to the story. You do radiation as a young person, especially a young woman. You do permanent damage to the body, and you age yourself. So it, but the whole anyway. It's hard. It is definitely still hard. But we got through it. We did all these things, and it was launching those books that actually made it possible for me to do online courses, that made it possible for me to get us out of that situation, to be able to do more for my wife, to be able to provide more so that we could get better food. Because, in permaculture, you try to do everything, and then there's this classic thing in permaculture, the permaculture burnout, because everyone tries to do everything. And then they're like, well, I'm milking my cow, my goat, and then I am raising, like you're trying to do everything. They're like, we have hogs, we have chickens, we have goat, and then they're like making the cheese, and then you know what I mean? You can eat up your whole day very, very easily. It's hard to do everything. And that's why most traditional diets, have certain foods that they use in multiple ways. And then everything was bioregional. So I definitely went through that, and to be able to get medicines, to be able to get food when I need to, when I had been sick too, because I have Crohn's, and so at times I can't digest things. I'm in a flare up, and I need an IV to bypass my stomach to get myself nutrition. So there's just been all this stuff that's happened, but we have triumphed and we've gotten through it. And it's been, I've been married almost 21 years, so it's been an adventure. And it still is. And so my boys are 14 and 18 now. And permaculture really has become the lens of my life. So initially it was like, how do I garden here? And then it became like, oh, this is how soil works, because I think about it from first principles, from natural principles first. And because I use that as my interpretive lens, I ask the same thing about medicine, about health. I ask the same thing about business design, about stacking functions. I mean, the way we're creating and designing the regenerative soil database is based around the permaculture function of stacking functions, such that when someone actually is posting their soil tests, their actions, and their results, there may be putting it publicly on my database, and that's to the benefit of their customers. See it, it's good advertisement. Now they're going to get more customers, but it's also advertising for the actual database itself. And all the people that are in the database are cross-comparing their test results to their own, so they're getting their own benefit. And it's those stacking regenerative functions that are ecosystemic all the time. That's how it works in nature. Like, yeah, well, this part of the cycle involves these 3 actors, and each one is turning this into that, and they're gaining this from that, and they're releasing this, and that's just life. So if we design our businesses this way, in such a way that's regenerative, so we're catching as much energy and reusing it as much as possible, we can live permaculturally. And That's really what it is for me. I think a lot of people, they see permaculture, they're like, oh, I see the word cult in the middle of that. And it's like, yeah, so agriculture is a cult? Like, what are you talking about? And like there's a lot of clickbait online about it and everything. But people think it's gardening. People think it's a design or a food forest or like a hippie thing, you know? But it's actually just looking at problems and solving them from a first principles, from a natural principles first perspective. And when you do that, it makes decisions really, really clean and clear and powerful. And so that's really what I've done with my business, what I've done with my life, and what I continue to do.
I think, Matt, what I pulled out of your like personal and professional path is you have challenged the conventional education, health, agriculture, and so on, like the big industries. You've challenged the conventional knowledge that is out there, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna research it myself, and I'm gonna figure out myself, and like maybe there's a better way. Maybe they're not telling us everything. That's kind of like what I'm getting from you. And since we just dived into permaculture, and you're really big on soil health and talking about soil health as it is an immune system of a plant and crop or anything you're trying to grow. Can you tell us a little bit what are for you, what did you, through your research, what are you teaching today? What are the key practices for building and maintaining soil health? And even if you want to dive into like what is perceived that it is and what do you actually think that is more, how to say, controversial that you've learned and it's kind of controversial talking about it, what is the actual, like, what are the actual practices?
Yeah. So for building soil health and for building our soil in general, there are regenerative cycles that if we align to every season will increase our soil organic matter, will increase our biology, will increase our ability to hold nutrients and capture nutrients. And so fertility will grow over time. I think the biggest conception is that misconception out there is that soil is something that you constantly have to reapply, constantly have to re-inoculate or rebuild. So in the cannabis industry, they dump their soil after every grow. In you know Eastern Washington and growing grains, they'll re-inoculate mycorrhizal fungi every season. And it's because they haven't looked. They're not using the epifluorescence microscope to actually
It's a
see.
reset.
Right,
I
right.
look,
And
yeah.
so they're just applying nitrogen. They're like, and they're just applying things every year because they think that they have to do that. And the reality is that when you align with regenerative cycles and systems, you can build up those
Mhm.
fertilities. So there are soils uh, in America where people are growing corn with no nitrogen added, and they're getting commercial competitive bushels per acre. And it's because they have amino sugars, which are a form of nitrogen, but they're from arthropod pieces, insect
Mhm.
pieces, microbes. And it's that necromass that is building and providing that fertility. And so I think there's this big misconception that we really have to just be that missing link in the soil cycle and just constantly be doing the same exact thing, and we could follow this clockwork. What I've seen in my work, and the if you have healthy plants, they will build healthy soils. So if you take care of the plant, make sure the plant is, following through on the plant health pyramid, has the minerals and nutrients and microbes it needs, it'll build soil faster than adding just compost. Compost is not structured. The carbonaceous exudates and the microbial manures and microbial necromass is actually at the size and of structure. So when it's released, it builds soil physically. Right there, right then, it's building soil. And they're aggregating. And so that aggregation, microaggregates become macroaggregates, which become the crumb structure of good soil. And so we need those things. And so when microbes are doing that work, when plant roots are doing that work, it's done correctly from the get-go. The thing when we mix in a lot of compost is the microbes have to keep doing work to structure it into soil. And a lot of people are like, oh, no, I'm going to just become, 10% organic matter. We're going to do 10% of the soil profile in this compost. We're going to do tonnage per acres. I only have 2 acres so I can baby it. And a lot of market gardeners do that. But their soil is still it's going to be like, like Home Depot potting soil. There's no aggregation. It's loose. You know what I mean? It's going to pancake. It's going to, lose air. It's going to become aerobic more easily. And so using plants, we and microbes to get plants to their highest levels of health. And you may need to do specific nutrients in a foliar or make sure they're in the soil initially. The plant health pyramid has specific nutrients that we're talking about. But when it does that, it pumps out carbon into the soil. That's such a high rate. It's higher than adding compost in terms of building your soil organic matter. So adding compost is great. Compost tea is great, but it's great because it enhances the plant mechanism. So yeah, adding that compost tea is going to give you a rhizophagy boost. But if you don't have those fundamental endophytes there, it's not going to be as powerful. If you don't have those fundamental endophytes there, your photosynthesis isn't even going to be as powerful. And you don't have any safeties on your photosynthesis. So I really like EM1. It is selected endophytes, but it's specific to this equation we're talking about right now. So part of the reason why, you guys are doing the nitro 50%, reduction in nitrogen added to fields and farms. Yeast, lactic acid bacteria, Lactobacillus species, and purple non-silver bacteria, specifically Rhodosodomonas palustris. These are endophytes that are ubiquitous in plants all over the world. And it's bringing these things back that allows them to more efficiently create those exudates, more efficiently manage its sugars, and manage photosynthesis. So what do I mean by that? When John Kemp was talking at EcoAg about literally about photosynthesis, about how light goes into the leaf, and how in that actual organ of the plant, you also have purple and silver bacteria, Rhodosodomonas palustris, and it also is doing photosynthesis. So they literally are helping with photosynthesis, doing it too, but they can feed 4 different ways. They can feed on light, they can feed on CO2, they can feed on, organic matter and sugars. So the, products of photosynthesis as well. So they're helping boost what's coming in, but they're also, at the end of the day, able to clean things up, eat those excess sugars. So that, at the beginning of the day, there's a clean plate, complete digestion for the plant. So that's cool, but that's just purple non-silver bacteria. There's also lactobacillus. That's going to change your nitrogen into amino acids, your nitrates into amino acids. Excess nitrate in a plant calls the insects that are pests from miles and miles away. It's a signal. And there's an argument about how they find that out. It doesn't matter, to the farmer, the exact mechanism. We all know that's how it works, and they arrive. And so sopping up, transforming because nitrates take 4 times as much water as amino acids, and amino acids actually give you energy. So these microbes are saving the plant energy, giving the plant energy, and saving the plant water. So it's an incredible flex, right? So it's like like the plant is like totally in a different position when it has these microbes. And then we all know how yeast works. And we're simply talking about with annuals that are partnering with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. We're talking about beer yeast, cerevisiae yeast, bread yeast. Lager yeast is going to be ectomycorrhizal fungi and those folks, and trees and alpine and stuff like that. That's what the yeast partners with. So that that's why we want to look to the over 90% of plants that are doing arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and partner with EM with them. And so yeast eats sugars to make CO2, and a plant can up to 45% can come from the CO2 released by the microbes inside the plant. So people talk like, okay, so in other words, it's like even if CO2 is a limiting factor in Iowa because everything's cheek to jowl plants in the middle of summer, if your plants have yeast, like, and all the other endophytes that are helping in EM1, your plants can get the CO2 that they need that is a limiting factor for the neighbor and not for you. So this internal control system, this is the microbiome of the plant. This is their digestive system, but it's also their homeostatic system. It's how they balance and control their levels of sugar and the forms of things. So these microbes are not the plant. They are the plant. That's the thing a lot of people don't understand is like the microbes they belong to the plant. And just because they're also in the soil, just because they're also in our kombucha, just because, they're in our yogurt and all this other stuff, doesn't mean that they don't actually belong to the plant. They evolve.
More than that, they are the plant. The plant is made of different microorganisms as bacteria. For example, the cell in the plant that is working on photosynthesis is actually a bacteria. It was developed from bacteria. So the question is which one was first. But of course, the microbes are the plant. The microbes are us. They build everything.
Yeah, the microbes inside us are us as well. And I think that's a paradigm shift for a lot of people. But getting just back to my point about building soil, it's when we give plants their natural microbiome inside themselves and then have the rhizospheric, in other words, around their roots, their rhizospheric microbiome, they do the work. How did soil get here? Soil got here because plants were allowed to do the work, because soil is regenerative and these microbes are regenerative. And so the benefits that they create, in other words, build and compound and accumulate over time. And we can follow those same exact pathways and build it up over time. And that's why, 20 years ago, people were like, oh, we just had compost and we're done and we did it. Nowadays, you talk to people who are doing this kind of work and they're like, oh, it's 3 to 5 years, that it's fully the transition takes, and you may see benefits that first season right out the gate, no doubt, because we're returning a plant to itself, essentially, by giving these endophytes to the plant. And so there's, of course, an expression of like joyous, growth and it's amazing, but there's so much more. So it's really about doing what's most natural, partnering with natural cycles, giving the plant the tools it needs to do its natural cycles and to do the things that we literally can't do. We can't design machines to imitate what the plants really do. We can't do all this work. They do the work. And EM1 is such a powerful tool that fundamentally helps the plant do everything it needs to do. So I really love the simplicity of EM1. I love, it took me so many years. I mean, back in the day, everyone was like, no one even knew purple non-sulfur bacteria was Rhodosomonas palustris. Everyone talked about these things with such like mystery and woo. And once you just learn, it's like, oh no, these microbes are ubiquitous and inside almost all the plants. These microbes are ubiquitous and inside almost all the compost because they were inside the plants. And so it like dispels a lot of the myths. I mean, people were like, it's anaerobic. It's facultative. The soil is not aerobic. We don't till the soil every other day. You got to turn that soil, keep it aerobic. We don't do that. It's facultative. It's in between. It breathes. So, so to build soil fastest and the fundamental is get healthy plants in there and keep healthy plants in there as long as possible and keep it covered. At end of the year, you got to, crimp it, but keep it covered with a living plant, photosynthesizing at its peak health and the greatest diversity possible. So you're doing cover crop, do 8 to 12 crops in there, but the microbes, the minimal mineral pieces they need to complete their cycles, and you'll be able to just start building soil like crazy.
I love that explanation. I mean, it all comes down to, I would feel like, if I can take this comparison, the conventional would be just put more and you'll get more fertilizer, more water, more this, more that, and you'll get more. Okay, you get a better plant, you get a healthier plant, a greener plant, or bigger yield, more fruits, whatever. And what you're saying, which we absolutely agree, and this is what we are teaching through our protocols, is it's the whole ecosystem. It's not one for one. It's not get one more, put one in, get one more. It's the whole ecosystem that needs to work. And actually, sometimes less is more, and let the soil, let the plant do its thing. Because if you're putting sugar, into a child, and you keep putting more and more and more, yeah, give one candy, and somebody's gonna have enough energy. Don't give them a whole bag. And I feel like we're doing the same thing with soil. We're doing the same thing with our health. We're doing the same thing with plants. We're doing the same thing in agriculture. We think that we just keep adding more instead of supporting the whole ecosystem to work. And it's really interesting, but how big role microbes play in this. Just adding organic matter without any biodiversity to use that organic matter is not going to get you anywhere.
Especially because most people are adding hot compost, and that's going to be pH 8. And so they're adding alkaline oxidized material. And so it's already like locked out a lot of its own nutrition and burned off a lot of its nutrition. And so, it's a powerful tool to be able to have something that's acidic, like EM. It really allows people to balance that out, to save their composts by fermenting them after they're done through the hot phase, or guide it through the hot phase and keep it in the mesophilic longer, and turn things directly into polysaccharides and nitrogen directly into amino acid.
And you mentioned before that it took you a while to get on a journey of understanding microbes and what E1 really is. But what was your aha moment? Do you remember what was the most significant moment when you're like, okay, now I get it, or now I know what I'm trying to do with this?
Yeah. So I think I've been trying to learn about this stuff for so many years. And so at first, I just was like, I knew so little. And so I would talk about the few that I knew. I mean, my books really demonstrate my understanding. And so you can go and see, like, in the children's book, I've got nematodes and there's bacterial feeders. And then, there's rudimentary things going on there. And so I had that rudimentary understanding that there were different like food web members like early on. That what happened for me with microbes was when I decided I wanted to see them. And then when I started looking it up online, I couldn't see like very many pictures that were definitive and were obvious. And then I started comparing, and I'm like, these look the same. It's like, wow, what's going on here? And there were so few pictures. And I just became really interested. And then I started noticing the way people talk about microbes. And, Elaine Ingham would be like, well, if you really want to know, you got to get Bergies. So I went and got Bergies,
Oh, that's a big book.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is just volume 2 of part C. So I became like really curious. John Kemp is like robust microbes. I'm like, who? And then like, all the natural farmers, Korean natural farmer people were like, you can't name microbes. And I was like, what? What was the hand motion? They were like so mad at me. They were like, I got called Kimosabe a bunch. And then they were like, he who tries will go blind. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, they all got like really, really mad and passive aggressive and said like these really weird cryptic things to me, except for Chris Trump. Chris Trump was like, what are you expecting to see? And I love Chris. Chris does great work. But for me, it was really like piqued my interest because no one wanted to like look. No one wanted to name. No one, like, everyone was like, no, it's working. Just don't look. It'll be fine. And I was like, that's weird, don't you think? You know? And so I just started reading, and then I discovered that purple non-silver bacteria was Rhodocytomonas and palustris and Rhodocytomonas spheroides that originally Dr. Higa was working on. Do I have it here? Yes. No. No. No, I don't. It's in the other room. But anyway, I've got. Yeah, it's Dr. Higa's book. Oh, it's right here.
Oh yeah, bonus points to pull up Higa. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I started reading his published papers, and so I was like, spheroides, and then I studied that for a little while, and then I figured out that he settled on palustris, and palustris is one of the most studied microbes in the world. It's in manure lagoons, it's inside our guts, it's inside the probiotics that are expensive, it's inside, our compost, our plants as an endophyte. It can feed on light. It can, it's unbelievable. It performs photosynthesis. It can give electrons and receive electrons. It can, use those bombardment of electricity to remove the ability for other microbes to take in iron. It's unbelievable. So it's also ecosystemically necessary. Like, the world wouldn't work if overnight Rhodocytomonas palustris no longer was here. Like, everything would break down. Everyone would slowly die. And so I realized that these microbes were super fundamental, and everyone was studying them in the GMO world. And so for me, the GMO people are tinkering with things that they don't understand, but they understand enough to be really dangerous. And so, like, I just started following and reading everything I could because I realized that they were working on controlling a microbe that's fundamental to all life. And so I started reading about what they were doing with it, and then I discovered E. coli is considered the universal chassis, and it is like the feedback loop between all nature and everything. And so there's E. coli in our gut, there's E. coli in the plants, there's E. coli in the soil. So it's wild, but it's all commensal. And so I began to realize that our paradigms of understanding soil, our paradigms for understanding microbes in our bodies were fundamentally flawed. I mean, that meme that goes around with the guy is like, you're mostly bacteria, you're not even mostly human. It's like broken paradigm. It's a broken paradigm. And even DNA, the way people think about DNA is a broken paradigm. microbes drop and pick up genes constantly, like every millisecond, in response to their environment. They're recalibrating their genes in reaction so they're the canaries in the coal mine. Microbes change first, and then the world changes around them. And so we can see changes before they happen. You can see things before they happen with if you can look the microbes is literally why doctors are looking at the microbes, in people's blood before they turn into, a corpse that has the stereotypical signs of this thing. You know what I mean? It's like, no. They're looking to see what the future will be. And so it became clear to me that people don't understand DNA. DNA is a river. So the microbes are constantly sensing their environment and changing. Our food even changes our epigenetics, our expression of DNA. We can turn genes off and on by what we eat, our exercise, and even what we believe. And so DNA is like a river, like the Mississippi. So when you test the water in the Mississippi, if it's been a drought, you will get a different reading. If it's been a typical rain, you'll get a certain reading. If it's just after major flooding, you'll get a completely different reading. But it's all the same river. So and the banks may change variable like a little bit. They may, you know what I mean? That's DNA. You'll have the expressions of things change. And so there's pleomorphism, there's horizontal gene transfer, things can change species and phyla. It's wild. And so and I mean, you have also the ambiguity of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi collecting other species and other phyla as nuclei, and then sourcing them for genetic material. So it's like, whoa, our paradigms for defining things are limited. And so we really have to look to the plants. We have to look to nature to let it teach us. And there's just been this simplification. There's been this, because it works, quote unquote works. They continue doing things that don't make any sense. And so I saw all this playing out. I saw all this confusion. And then I got into doing microscopy, and I saw that a lot of people were just talking nonsense. So you see these like videos online of people like on their microscope without a camera. Okay. So they don't know what they're looking at when a viewer is watching this person. And this person's like, oh yeah, here we go. I see some pathogenic, blah, 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 blah. And they're just making it up. And I can tell now. But like when I was younger, like 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, I was like, whoa, wow, this is amazing. There's a lot of people just making things up. And then you look at the literature, the published literature, and you realize a lot of these images are like fuzzy and pixelated. And you're like, why are they not showing their work? Why are they showing like fudged work? Why, like purposely making it so that you can't see it? Well, you can't argue with someone and say that they're wrong if you can't actually see the original work. And so the microscopy world, because they didn't use cameras, they just looked at things and wrote down their results. They didn't have any accountability. So people were like, oh no, I saw a bigger one last week. It's like ridiculously childish, but you can see how this could easily happen if there's no accountability, if there's no transparency. And so like I saw the world around microbes was sorely lacking in clarity, sorely lacking in transparency. And because of that, there was a lot of things that people were naively doing. And some people were obviously doing because they were like, well, no one will ever know. It's like, well, we know now. And the database.
A lot of time what gets shared is interpretation of a result and not a result itself. I feel like a lot of time when I'm trying to do some research on something, there's a lot of interpretation that gets pushed first, and then you have to actually do a lot of work to get to the initial result, and then compare and then make your own interpretation if that's what you're trying to achieve. But you have to sit through actual interpretations and not result itself.
Yeah, and they're going for a headline because they're trying to keep their tenure. They're trying to get into journals. It's a terrible system the way it currently is done, but that's why the regenerative soil database is going to be so powerful and useful for like TeraGanix and other people too, because the whole thing is simple. If we just have the ability to show before tests, the actions, and then what you used and how you used it, it's like, oh yeah, we're doing 5 gallons per acre of EM in our irrigation, and then the after, and then it showcases what happened, what you added, and that's all farmers really need to like start making better decisions. They're like, especially for you guys, if that information's on the database, all your farmers, you have this whole before and after thing with using EM in the irrigation, and all those farmers can be like, holy cow, so they got the same yield or better yield with half the nitrogen input. Ah, they're like, it's like a miracle for these guys because it's so much money when you're up at 200,000 acres. So I'm really excited for that, but to see it roll forward, because all this ambiguity, all this misinformation that's been going around, and confusion that ties to it. I mean, people spread misinformation about EM for years. They're like, oh no, it'll kill your plants. It's in your plants, bro. What are you talking about? That is literally already in your plant. You're just
Soil, yeah.
yeah. We're just upping it
And
your
your
their level. Right. It's inside. It's part of you. It's you. They're attacking themselves. And so it's wild. And so for me, I saw these deep contradictions and also these myths that were going around, and people were just not putting like their thinking caps on. And so I just started showcasing like DNA testing compost and showing, oh, here are the microbes that are called the EM, the predominant microbes that are in EM right there. And so how is it not aerobic when they're there? So it's obviously not anaerobic because they're in your hot compost,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're facultative and they're already in the plants. That's the reason they're in your compost. So folks, I've been able to bring a lot of like feedback loops back to people that they can prove to themselves so that they can see the truths for themselves, make better decisions from what they know, that they can see, that they can verify. And that's been the most important thing for me, because the thing is, it's like if I just went along with the same pattern, it was like, trust me, bro, it's this way, we would probably end up in the same spot. But the ability for me to test it and show it, and then you to test it and you to see it, to verify it, is the most critical, fundamental scientific thing. And in the permaculture community, in the soil community, we've been doing that for years with EM.
And I love that you're saying that. Actually, I remember I was watching you on one of the other podcasts. You were a guest there, and you were talking a little bit about your opinion about university studies. And I laughed so hard because we kind of align on that one. And it's exactly what you're saying, right? You test it, you show it, you test it, you show it, and then you put those together like before and afters. It's kind of our approach, as you know, with agriculture. For example, the big one is, yeah, we're showing that you can reduce your nitrogen by half and maintain the same yield. But we're really not doing, because we get questions, are you doing university studies and stuff like that? We're not doing that. We're not putting it into a control environment that it wasn't farmed for years and will continue to be farmed for years. We are putting it on real farms with independent farmers. And we're like, look, it's your first year. Do a trial, do a side by side, like see it yourself. I will show you what others are doing. You can see their side by side. They can see their before and afters. And that is our scientific data, is like, we do it. We do it consistently, continuously, the same way. We do it in different environmental conditions, in different soils, in different weather conditions, and we're getting consistent results, getting consistent data. And then you do it, and we're just gonna add, we're just gonna add, we're just gonna add. And that is how we do our trials. And we believe that this is how you show if something is actually working.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, universities, they run those university farms with undergraduate students and graduate students. And so, you're going to get mixed results. You're going to get really weird things happening. And it's not, I mean, it just makes so much more sense to work with the actual farmers, to work with the actual professionals, to work with people who work with generational land, so that you have, the father and the grandfather who have both been on that land, and they can give so much more
And
insight.
change one condition, because that is science, right? It's you
Right.
go and you change one condition that you're trying to track. And if we can do it in different states, on different soils, on different weather conditions, we are changing only one condition and trying not to control the whole study, the whole experiment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. Yeah, and so this return to nature, I think people really get. I think that's the reason why there's been so much support for my work, so much support for the database, and the recent interest, the explosion of interest in microbes. And I think there's also an increase in understanding. I've been able to help people really open some doors, because the reality is, it's like, you can just look these things up. The studies are all there. The amazing, endophytic reality of yeast, of lactobacillus species, of purple and silver bacteria, Rhodosodomonas palustris. You just look it up. Streptomyces, right? You can just look it up. And so I've just highlighted these things, and people have done the testing and seen it, and then they've gone, Googled it, Google Scholared it, and then found the studies. And people are really starting to realize and get enthusiastic. I go to farmers, events and conferences, and they're getting it. They're watching. They are considering, and they're trying to figure out how to do it for them. So I think we're at a cusp moment in history, and I think we're going to have massive adoption as we go from, I think it's 5 to 15% of the market, depending on what we're talking about. And it's basic regenerative, not even endophytic regenerative, right? We're talking about people doing cover crops mostly. Some of them are doing inoculations. But we have so much growth ahead of us in regenerative ag, in regenerative soil, that we're going to just see an explosion of adoption of viral techniques and methods. And it's going to be so wonderful to witness, because we're going to see all these farmers who for years have felt like they've been fumbling in the dark. And we're providing the thing, and they've been in the dark, that when we bring them stuff like EM, sometimes, not a lot of them know about it, but sometimes they're like, meet it with suspicion, because they've been burned before. And so those farmers are going to be able to see the results, see the transparency, and then be able to make these moves and overcome those past experiences and prejudices. And so we're going to have massive adoption. We're going to have massive sea change in our food, in the practice of growing food. And in 10 to 20 years from now, it's just going to be a completely different world in terms of health, because it'll trickle down from our food, from our soil, into us.
Yeah, that was something I was curious your opinion on. Like, what does that look like in the next 10, 20, and 50 years? Just kind of like, practically, what does that adoption look like, and what is your vision for that scale of
Well,
what's
there's
your
two things happening right
lifestyle?
now. It's happening right now. So there's people who are trying to aggregate as much data as possible to get at this information. And I believe in the opposite of what everyone else seems to believe. They're all doing it privately and trying to like take in and control the information so that they can benefit from it. I am convinced that the most effective way to do this is the inverse of that. Is
I
to
love
flip
open
it
source.
and make it useful to all of us. And so that's what the database is. It's going to be a community where your pictures and your images and your results can be compared with other people's. And that's going to allow us to become better. And so it's a very simple concept, but it's never been done. And so I envision, 10 to 20 years, it getting really, in 20 to 25 years, we're going to have full adoption because of the economic imperative. So if you're putting less inputs in, if your soil is continuously improving, if you're holding more water, using less water, and your product is still getting better, you economically are going to just beat everyone in your industry. And this is going to force everyone in the industry to shift. But what I'm encouraging is transparency and to get people excited about pride in their industry. So they start sharing tips and helping each other as an industry. And once that idea and practice begins to go more viral, you're going to have people, because the thing is, the demand is actually so much greater than people realize. There's all these subsidies, all these weird backdoor deals with farmers that are like holding back farms, holding back supply chains from fully developing. Mark Shepard said it once on a podcast with me. He's like, Matt, for regenerative foods, we can't supply even a fraction of what the actual demand is. And he's like, if we just start doing this, the demand will be so like it won't ever end. We'll just switch the whole market over. And it's because it's superior food, because they make more money, because we're also arriving at a time where the handheld devices are going to be able to tell you the nutrient density between apple A and B, tomato A and B at the farmer's market. And so there's no hiding. We're going into a time period where the results you can't hide. So we need to be doing testing and making it transparent so that before it gets to market, before it gets to the end of the season even, or the end of the growth phase, you know what's going on. You can react in the real time moment so that when it comes to harvest, you fixed it, you overcame it. It's going to be better next year because of what you did this year, all those kinds of things. But it's only through the transparency, the feedback loop, and that's what the database is going to give. But we have all the pieces. And so TeraGanix, I imagine you guys are going to just explode. Like your business is going to 10x to 100x. It's going to explode because the demand, people haven't even touched it yet. It's there, it's waiting, but people haven't even begun. So I imagine in 10 to 20 years, we're going to have entire industry switched over. And you can see it right now. So cannabis is already like halfway there, right? Viticulture is starting. Almonds are starting. Avocados are starting. Things that are high ticket items where they can spend the money to fix things, to get ahead, they're doing it. And so the people who are selling things that are at a high price are now reinvesting in the soil, making things regenerative. And what's wild is they're going to make so much more money. So they're like,
Yes, and the market is already talking about, eating real food, right? That's the first step. Let's eat real food with real ingredients where you can see ingredient and you can read what the ingredient is.
sure.
The next step is how that food was produced, right? Using less and less chemicals, which, let's be honest, they bind with whatever you put it in, and you eventually will consume that. And the next step will be, like you're saying, is comparing the nutrient value of apple A and apple B, which comes back again to how it was produced, and that is, I think, a next step that we're gonna soon see in the market.
As well as arsenic and aluminum levels, as well as, like pesticide residues. Because, I mean, right now we've got a lot of organic foods that they're testing, they're finding high levels of glyphosate in. So we have to, I mean, it's just going to happen. The accountability is going to be inevitable. The Zen Honeycut, Moms Across America, she is going to hold people, and that organization is going to hold people accountable. They're part of like the Children's Health Network. I was interviewed on there by Zen at one point. That is RFK Junior's network. This is all going to happen, and the net result is people are going to be held accountable. The databases, I believe, need to stay private. They need to stay independent of the government to keep government officials and agencies accountable. So I expect the RSoil database to eventually start having copycats in different areas. So like air, people start testing the air in everyone's bioregion and start tracking the data from that regularly. And then I think of Ohio and Palestine, East Palestine. I think of the water. I think of Detroit. I think of all these areas where it's like, oh, well, who is watching the water? It's like, oh, well, we should have community laboratories everywhere. All these personalized testers, we need to have adopted everywhere so that they lower the prices so that it suddenly becomes more affordable to everyone. And the more we use them, the more data there is, and the more useful that data is. I think there is a group of people and companies that are right now thinking that they can buy up all the information and sit on it. And so you have a lot of these people who are doing information, then grabbing it and putting it behind the scenes and using it to leverage. Those companies are going to get bought out by people like Wiley's, who's buying every publication they can and privatizing and putting it behind a paywall right now. And so I think we have a quiet war happening right now over information. And a lot of my students will look up the same word combination the next day and we won't find the same papers, right? And so unless you have the same exact wording or the same exact link, sometimes you cannot find the same paper. There's weird things.
Exactly.
And then
That's kind of what I was telling before, is like it takes so much effort to get to the actual data because you keep getting interpretations and they change daily. Like sometimes it's hard to get to the normal facts, even like historic or any facts that I've known for since I was born. They're gone. They're gone from the internet.
yeah, so what's funny is no one ever, I haven't heard anyone put together the fact that when we ask ChatGPT for citations and quotes, it generates made up stuff. And then everyone's like, I looked it up. It's a citation doesn't exist. Now, what is to stop them from generating a full paper and citation that doesn't exist and put it on a page? Like, right? And so the ability for it to generate what looks like and sounds like an academic paper citation in the bottom of a paper, being like, oh no, this is where the information comes from, this citation. This is why I go on rabbit holes and then like click on all the citations and dig out all the citations and print them physically out and then put them in, binders. He's like, wait, I'm literally tracking everything that I get and put into my books.
So good.
And it's old school. I mean, it's really, really old school. And most people.
No, I agree. I'm definitely on a mission of buying physical books and getting like the data that's like printed out. It's there, that I don't rely that I will find it next week on the internet.
Right. But then it's also it opens up the other door and we're like, well, we really need to test all this stuff. We really need to let this all play out because how much of this university science is trustworthy? How much of it is replicable? How much of it is anecdotal? Because they're testing, a university extension field and saying, this is the way it is. That's not that. That's anecdotal. You know what I mean? Or they're taking composite studies where they're like, well, we took 500 different published papers and took their results and then made this paper. It's like, well, how many of those 500 people are, 500, well, not people, 500 groups of people are fully competent and doing the right thing? And so it compounds the ambiguity around what is true and what is not when they do that. And it's very useful because it seems like it's powerful. But you can just mix in bad data with it. So having the clarity of being able to do exactly what you're talking about, look at the variables. And so I want to be able to have corn farmers, let's say in Iowa, be able to compare to other Iowa corn farmers, and they're like, oh, wow, the pH in our region for corn farmers is like this. And then they're like, wow, the the regenerative folk are like here on this, and then the conventional are here on this, and then like they will be able to compare and see themselves and see where they could go, and it'll just open up so much honest reflection and true feedback so that they can make wiser decisions at a faster rate. And I firmly believe that people, when they're given the right information and have the right tools for interpretation and action, they make the best decisions. And especially when you help them make the decision themselves. And I literally mean like that. I'm not helping them make the decision. I'm helping them make the decision. And when you do that,
Informed decisions.
yes. And that's what you guys are doing. You all are co-creating the realization for the farmer. So at the end of your trial where you're testing EM and lowering their nitrogen amounts, they're converted. They're like, I know this works. We just did it together. And it's so honorable what you guys are doing. And it's just so awesome. I mean, folks don't realize how much money it is to pay for synthetic nitrogen. And so they don't realize how you guys went right to like the heart of the problem for so many of these farmers, and you're relieving the pressure. And I just want to honor you for that and thank you for that, because I know you're taking pressure off families, pressure off individual farmers, and at a systemic level, this is going to cure so much pain. So thank you.
Wow. Appreciate the words, Ian. For the R soil database, is that available today?
No, not yet. So we got a group of 7 people working on it. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have single sign-in logins. It's going to be super secure. It's going to be so secure that it can be used at universities, logins with students. We're going to be designing so that it's hyper rigorous, so that it can scale, so that this can become my main focus. So I'm switching up right now. I love permaculture. Permaculture is foundational. It's the lens by I do everything. I'm teaching the last PDC I'll ever teach, I think. I'm just going to focus on the linchpin for everything, which is soil. And so I'm going to be just teaching regenerative soil microscopy. Regenerative soil microscopy, the new season starts March 31st. So if folks want to go to regenerativesoilmicroscopy.com, they can check that out. And then the database, all the information from the testing and the work that my students are doing between the 2 classes. I don't know what the overlap is, but the total number on the 2 classes, because there's overlap, there's people in both classes, is about 1,000 people. So we're going to start with somewhere under 1,000 people. Maybe it might be 800, it might be 900, I don't know. But we're going to start with that group, and they're going to provide the information from their soil tests, their microscope work, and it's going to provide this incredible backbone, as well as folks that have been doing this for decades. I'm asking them, individuals that are like all-stars, I'm asking them to give the database their legacy of information. So 30 years of documentation kind of stuff. Because where will it go? And then how will it actually continue to serve the community otherwise? And so I really want to create a open system such that people can go in, they become a member of it, compare to everything, and then flip their website. You can mark it, and I want it to be able to be your website and then select sites. So it's like, it doesn't have to be all your sites. You can select these commercial ones that you worked on and then this other one. it's totally up to you. You might have private clients that don't want that information public yet because they want to win to see the end of it, and then you can make it public, right? But the idea is that they get to advertise their work as soil consultants. They get to advertise their successes as farms, as market gardeners, as compost companies, and that data showcases them, but then it provides a backbone for comparison for everyone else. So all the people like wanting to get good compost, they can now compare it directly to like regular uploads of information and comparison data that top composters like Catalyst Biomemons or Wormies are putting up there. And then they can improve their own practice. And so that self-feedback loop, I think, is going to change everything. I think it's going to be really powerful. So there are 7 people working on it right now. We're working on creating the beta testing. It will be such that my students, this group, 800, 900 of us or so, are going to populate it. And then we're going to keep it going for a while. And then when we work out the kinks, so I'm going to have quarterly meetings, and then we'll have an open mic, and I'll let people like share the feedback, and then the team and I will make sure that it's right and fix things and get things going, and then we'll make it public. But the idea is I want my students to be able to have the time to arrive at the epiphanies that I know are waiting. So there's a bunch of things I've seen and documented that I know will replicate out, but are also so controversial that they need to just play out, and people need to like recognize and see them in the community, such that we'll be able to myth and debunk and do all these things before any other data sets come in. And also we'll have emergent leaders from our community who are good at certain things emerge, and we can honor them and showcase them so that when we allow full public in, those people are already honored and showcased so that they get recognized by the public in that light. I think I have that. They're my students, and we were going back to like the days where I really was there to protect my students, and my students are microscopy workers and soil consultants, a lot of them, and they haven't had a clear pathway for their business in their industry. And this is it. I'm going to give them the ability to have their clients' results before and after with the actions they took. This is their resume, and it's public. So their next client can go on, or people can go for their website onto there and then see their actual results. And so suddenly, and not only that, the way I teach microscopy allows for like quick comprehension, and allows for your clients to understand what you're doing and how you're doing it, such that you co-create these solutions together, which is the most powerful way to do it. And so we're going to have these consultants make more money because they're finally going to get appreciated. Instead of just giving them a number, oh, you're a 5. We have a lot of work to do. It's like, what? Do you have that? Great. That's a number of this microbe. I don't even know what the microbe looks like. How do you know the number? None of that. We need to see these things. We need to see these things side by side so we can compare them. And a layman will know especially if you line these things up, which has more biology in it right off the bat. A layman will know a full inoculation, especially if you're guiding them and that's your job, especially if the database to show them the best and the worst. So it's going to give consultants for the first time the ability to be appreciated, to showcase their talents, and to actually organize their data. So when you start doing this for a few years, you realize you have an ocean of images and data. And so it becomes overwhelming very quickly, and then finding things extraordinarily hard. And so this is going to be organized around timelines for areas within sites. So you have a site, and it's your farm, and then you have 5 areas, A through E, and yeah, I was right, E. And so you have these 5 areas, and they have a timeline, and they're the dates, and then it's like testing or actions, and then under the actions you get the tests on what you added, your compost test, your EM test. And so it will give everyone a full story of that area, and they'll be able to see where it came from and where it went, the actions taken, and they'll be able to compare it. And that is literally going to change everything, because it gives people the actual ability to see what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and compare that to themselves. So I'm really excited for it. It's gonna start in 2025. The beta testing for sure is gonna start soon. We're working on the banners, the logo, the page layout right now, the information entry, and then the security, because it has to be super secure, because people are going to be putting the location down, people are going to do all these different things. I want to make sure it's like, we have a guy who's top 100 Fortune 100, not Fortune 500, top Fortune 100 security guy who's helping design it. So that way it gets adopted into universities, because it'll be so secure, and it's going to change everything. So I don't have an exact date on when we'll go public, but
we'll keep everyone updated.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys.
No, we appreciate you. We appreciate you and taking the time with us. Yeah, when we push this out, we'll include all the links to everything. Yeah, I mean, you've got a plethora of books and knowledge base to dig into, and so we'll link everything there. And you said you're doing the last cohort of your course coming up.
So this I'm doing the last time through for the Advanced Permaculture Student Online. It's a course I've taught for over 8 years. It is the first Kajabi course I ever did. It's my third online course, and it's been incredible. We've had over close to 1,200 students. We've helped so many people. I've had students join that and then start their own businesses. I've had people use that to buy land. It's been an incredible thing, but most of the questions are around soil.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, so with a microscope, I'm like, dude, we're talking about pattern literacy in permaculture, spirals and the collection of energy and the efficiency. Like, come on, and they're like, okay, that's great. But with lab brewing, and I'm like, so they all really just want me to dive into the soil. And the reality is this: there's so many. My program's going to be self-paced and automated. They can still take the Advanced Permaculture Student Online. They can still get the certification. I'm just not doing the live sessions. But everyone wants me to teach the soil microscopy and regenerative soil, because no one else is teaching it. So there's all these other permaculture teachers. You got Jeff Lawton, you got, Eric Olson, Andrew Millison, all these folks teaching permaculture. They don't teach it like me. I'm going to be different. I've got a mastery in education. You know what I mean? My curriculum's standard based. So you can get triple science elective credit for it if you're in high school, and people teaching in universities and such. But that, you know what I mean? Like, I did all that. It was awesome, but there's no one else doing the soil and soil microscopy properly. So that's why I do it, and that's why those courses are so popular. Those books are so popular, and it really, I just feel really honored to have received that opportunity to write that book. The book really came to me as an idea, and then I put it out among a bunch of other ideas in a poll, like being like, permaculture gardening, permaculture for beginners, or permaculture soil science. And I didn't think anyone would go for the soil thing, and they all did. And in writing it, I changed the name to Regenerative Soil, and there became this weight and momentum and power to it that I was like, oh, this book is going to be made regardless of if I make it or not. Someone is going to write the book, Regenerative Soil, and it's your opportunity to do it or not. And I felt it. I was like, wow, this is a momentous moment. Those moments that have weight to them? It was one of those moments in my life. And it became my bestseller. So It was my first, yeah, and now Microscopy has become a bestseller at different times. And over Christmas this year, it was number 3 in the UK. So it's been really humbling. It was my Regenerative Soil book was my 23rd book. I've been doing this, hitting the wall for a while. But it was writing that book, serving at such a high level that market gardeners are doubling their yields. Farmers are fundamentally changing and applying these things on 200,000 acres. It changed me in writing it and creating it, and I knew it was going to be special, but I had no idea it would be so important. And I'm just humbled, and I just feel incredibly blessed and lucky that I followed through with all that. I wrote the book in 12 months, and 3 of those months was doing all those cartoon cycles for each element, you know what I mean, mineral, which changed everything. No one had ever seen anything like that before. So yeah, it's a book right here. If you don't have it, folks, check it out. It will change everything for you. And so it just is my gift that I get to keep giving to the world, and that's why I'm going to be focusing on it. I'm going to be eventually writing in the next year a 3rd edition, so it'll be like 100 pages longer. It'll be extra thick, but we'll keep going and growing, and that's why I'm doing just the soil. There's so much demand. No one else is teaching this stuff, and I could tell by the feedback I'm getting from farmers and business owners and other people that I need to keep doing this, because the database is going to help you guys. The database is going to help Elevate Ag. It's going to help, all these other people's green cover, right? It's going to help everyone. And I'm like, oh, this is my opportunity to help everyone do what they're doing at a better level. This is the opportunity then. And, I love permaculture. I love teaching permaculture. I love changing people's lives. That course has been called Life Changing by so many people who have taken it. But it's so different when you're the only one. And so different when this information has never been put together before, and it's causing so much change. So that's why I'm switching and just doubling down.
Well, I mean, thanks for everything you do, dude.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Matt, for coming. It was inspiring to hear your story. It was great talking about microbiology and soil. But for me personally, the best thing is seeing somebody who challenges the status quo. And then you have 2 paths. One is you get frustrated, you lean into it, you throw your hands in the air and be like, I give up. Or you do it like you do, you elevate above it. You stay true to yourself, you stay true to seeking the truth, and then, being authentic and researching and informing others, and then letting them do their own decision, which I think is a very noble work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love it.
And thanks for sharing your story at the beginning and the vulnerability there, and that really hit home. So I'm just grateful and honored to have you on and to kick it off that way was, yeah. Thank you, man.
Thank you both.